You're listening to a Brooklyn Nets episode of the Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the team's latest goings-on as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, Nets fans! Welcome to my Brooklyn Nets off-season preview here on the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I like to start off my off-season previews with season synopses. So, I'm just going to quickly go through the Nets season. This was a punt year, alright? No one expected this team to do anything. Was this team expected to make the playoffs? Yes. But once they got there, there really wasn't much of a sense that they could do anything special. Maybe they could take a round depending on who they went up against. But taking two was kind of pushing it. There was a possibility, a very remote one, that never really got a lot of steam, but it's worth mentioning, that Kevin Durant could have come back by the time the playoffs started, but like I said, it never happened. He didn't even travel to Orlando for the bubble. It was never going to happen. But this season went off the rails pretty quickly. Kyrie Irving gets bitten by the injury bug. He only plays in 20 games this year. And the team is really led by Spencer Dinwiddie and Caris LeVert. LeVert dealt with his own injury concerns. He only played 45 games. But this team was really a shell of what we knew it could be. No one really got too bent out of shape. I mean, were there some people shouting doom and gloom? Yeah, there were always going to be a few knuckleheads, but like I said, they were knuckleheads. The prevailing sentiment was, wait until next year when Durant and Kyrie are on the court together and everything will be fine. But then Kenny Atkinson gets fired. It came out that the message had gotten stale. Atkinson didn't think he could get through to the players anymore. Durant and Kyrie wanted someone else. They were just kind of tiring of the message. And look, when you bring in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, they have a say in who the coach is. It's just that simple. That's not the way it should be, but it's the way it is in the NBA. The players run the league. So Jacques Vaughn takes over, and in his 2 games as interim Nets coach in March, he went undefeated. He went 2-0. He beat the Bulls by 3. He beat the Lakers by 2. It was impressive. But then the pause happened. The Nets get decimated by the coronavirus. A skeleton group of players travel to Orlando. No Wilson Chandler. No Nick Claxton. No Spencer Dinwiddie, no Kevin Durant, no Joe Harris for the last 2 games of the Raptors series, no Kyrie Irving, no DeAndre Jordan, and no Taurean Prince. The players that the Nets were putting out never should have been playing crunch time basketball. They played well in the restart. They went 5-3 in the seeding games, but they got swept by the Raptors. I thought they could have taken a couple games. Needless to say, I was wrong. And with that sweep, Jacques Vaughn pretty much cemented the fact that he's not going to be the Nets head coach going forward. I don't see how he survives that. I like Vaughn. He was in a tough spot. I think he did the best he could. But the Nets need more than that. They need a superstar head coach. A guy who's going to take this team from the 7th seed to the 1 seed, and more importantly, an NBA title. Speaking of coaches, I made a list with 5 names on it. And any one of these 5 guys will be acceptable to me as Nets head coach. The top 3 are the guys who I think are the clear-cut top candidates, and the bottom 2 are guys who I like, but I won't love. I'm not going to mention any active coaches. Greg Popovich's name has been thrown out there. If the Nets can get Popovich, he's the perfect hire. If the Nets can get Mike D'Antoni, he's the perfect hire. But they're still under contract with their respective teams. It's unfair for me to speculate on any active coaches. So my list is Jeff Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, Tyronn Lue, and Stan Van Gundy. Are you sensing a theme there? They all have NBA head coaching experience. They all did a really good job as head coach. In fact, every single one of those guys, with the exception of Mark Jackson, has made an NBA Finals. At least once. And Tyronn Lue obviously won an NBA Finals in 2016. But I'll go through my rationale. Jeff Van Gundy has been linked to every NBA head coaching vacancy since he left for the broadcasting job. We know his resume, paid his dues with the Knicks. The team plays really well under him. Then in the 01-02 season, they get off to a slow start, 10-9. Van Gundy resigns. He then goes to Houston and underachieves. They made the playoffs 3 times in his 4 seasons there, but he never won a playoff series with the Rockets. But this guy is really smart. You hear it every time you listen to him broadcast. Now, even though the guy complains a lot, he is smart. He knows the game inside and out. And this is a guy who was incredibly successful with the Knicks. In fact, he's probably the last really good, bordering on great coach the Knicks have had. That is impressive. Jeff Van Gundy would make a ton of sense. What I don't like is he hasn't coached since 2007, and I don't even know if he wants to leave. Once you get comfortable as a broadcaster, it can take a Godfather offer to convince you to leave. I mean, maybe JVG is intrigued by the idea of coaching Durant and Kyrie. I think it's a very appealing job. There is a lot of pressure there to win instantly, but you have the talent necessary to win instantly. I think if Jeff Van Gundy is going to leave his primetime national TV broadcasting slot, it's going to be for the Nets. I don't see it with the Sixers. I don't see it with the Rockets. I think it's going to be with the Nets if he leaves. Speaking of that primetime group, Mark Jackson obviously sits next to Van Gundy. And Jackson lasted 3 seasons as Warriors head coach. It didn't end that well. In 13-14, they won 51 games, but they were eliminated in the first round by an inferior Clippers team. And then right after that, Steve Kerr comes in and the Warriors win an NBA title. I get that it's a bad look, but Mark Jackson inherited a Warriors team that was a laughingstock. He took over in the lockout-shortened season of 11-12. Before that, they hadn't made the playoffs since 06-07, when Don Nelson led them past the 1-seeded Mavericks. Before that, they hadn't made the playoffs since 93-94. Mark Jackson really laid the foundation for the Warriors dynasty. Now, Steve Kerr built the majority of the house, but Jackson did build the foundation. He's a local guy, born and raised in Brooklyn, went to high school in Brooklyn, went to college at St. John's, played for the Knicks. He knows the town inside and out. And Jackson did a really good job as Warriors head coach. Not great. It is a bad look that the Warriors were immediately fantastic after he left. But like I said, Jackson developed the foundation. If Durant and Kyrie want to bring in a former player who will probably be a little bit easier on them, Mark Jackson would make a ton of sense. He was actually rumored to take over for the Nets after Jason Kidd bolted for the Bucks. They ended up going with Lionel Hollins. Not the best move that the Nets ever made. Mike Brown is the dark horse candidate, and I really haven't seen him linked to the Nets at all. But I don't understand why. In his first 5 years coaching the Cavaliers, they always made the playoffs, and they always did really well. You know, they won at least one playoff series. Then he goes to the Lakers, and they play well. They win a playoff series in the lockout-shortened year. But then the Lakers get off to a bad start in 12-13. They go 1-4. Brown gets dumped, replaced with Mike D'Antoni. He goes back to Cleveland. It's a homecoming. This guy was successful here and he wants to be here. To hell with LeBron. Blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it didn't end well. Brown only lasted 1 season. He should have stayed for more than 1 season, but Dan Gilbert got impatient. Brown has spent the last 4 years as an assistant coach with the Warriors. so he knows Kevin Durant. I don't know if the two of them got along or not. But this guy has been a successful head coach before. You want to tell me it was all because of LeBron? I don't think so. Did LeBron help? Undeniably. But I think Mike Brown was a big part of why those Cavs teams were successful in LeBron's first stint there. LeBron was the seminal reason, but Mike Brown was the secondary reason. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that Mike Brown is probably the third best coach LeBron has ever played for. It's Eric Spoelstra, Tyronn Lue, and then Mike Brown. He knows how to handle a star. He knows how to handle the expectation of winning right away. I think Mike Brown makes a ton of sense. I understand he may not be the sexiest name out there, but the guy's been successful in this league before. I think it's a safe hire. It's a hire that can work. I'd be really happy if they brought in Mike Brown. Speaking of coaches that Durant or Kyrie know, Tyronn Lue's name got thrown out the second Kenny Atkinson was fired. This guy was great for the Cavs. He led them to 3 straight NBA Finals. He won in 16. In fact, in David Blatt's only full year as Cavs head coach, there were reports that said the players liked Lue more than Blatt. I believe it. He does get along well with players. He's a former player. And again, he knows how to handle stars. But Kyrie Irving was really unhappy at the end of his time in Cleveland. There were reports that said he wasn't getting along with Lue, just as there were reports saying that he didn't get along with LeBron. Maybe those reports were false. Maybe Tyronn Lue really did get along with Kyrie, and Lue did his best to try to mend fences. If that's the truth, and Kyrie Irving really gets along with Tyronn Lue, then yeah, let's bring him in yesterday. I like Tyronn Lue a lot. But there's that specter hovering over the situation that Kyrie could become unhappy again. To me, it's too risky. If you're Sean Marks, you need to sit Kyrie Irving down and say to him, hey, do you want us to interview Tyronn Lue? If you say yes, great, we'll do it. If you say no, if you don't like him, I won't ask. That has to be Kyrie's call. Just as Mike Brown has to be Kevin Durant's call, Tyronn Lue has to be Kyrie Irving's call. If Marks steamrolls ahead with one of them without getting prior approval from Durant or Irving, that's a bad situation. And Stan Van Gundy was really good in Orlando. They finished with at least 50 wins in his first 4 seasons there. They made an NBA Finals with Dwight Howard and Rafer Alston as their 2 best players. I mean, make no mistake about it, Stan Van Gundy is a really good coach in this league. The thing is, I don't know how well he gets along with stars. We all remember how the Dwight Howard situation ended. The 2 of them clashed a lot. And in Detroit, he clashed a lot with Josh Smith. If you can't get along with Josh Smith and Dwight Howard, how are you going to get along with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? We all know the track record that Stan Van Gundy has. Very successful track record. But if he can't get along with stars, if he can't alter his approach, he's not the right guy for the Nets. Speaking of superstars, I think it's pretty apparent that the Nets need a third one. It can't be Karis LeVert, alright? It just can't. If LeVert really could be a superstar in this league, he would have done more against the Raptors. Same thing with Jared Allen. I just don't think they have a spot on the Nets going forward. They need a third guy. And the biggest name that's been mentioned the most when it comes to being traded to the Nets is Bradley Beal. It's been rumored a lot. Would add another scorer, good defender. I mean, a starting lineup of Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan sounds pretty good to me. In fact, that sounds more than pretty good. That sounds great. That sounds like a starting five that can win an NBA title. Here's the trade that I would do for Bradley Beal. Karis LeVert, Taurean Prince, Jared Allen, Rodion Kurucs, and 2 firsts. LeVert has to be the centerpiece of this trade. I understand that teams may push for Spencer Dinwiddie. I really don't want to trade Dinwiddie. Given what happened to Kyrie Irving this year, I just think that Dinwiddie's too valuable. He's one of the best sixth men in the NBA. I really don't want to trade Dinwiddie. And I think this trade is fair. LeVert's a really good player. Taurean Prince is okay. Jared Allen's a really good young center. I don't know what you do with Thomas Bryant, but look, one of them can come off the bench. How would you like having one of those guys off the bench? That makes your bench pretty scary. And Rodion Kurucs is a quality young player in this league. He's not great, but he's a solid role player. And the 2 firsts are 2 firsts. I don't care for what years. 21 and 23, 22 and 24, 21 and 24. I really don't care. According to TradeNBA.com, that trade is valid under the salary cap. And it's actually better for the Wizards than it is the Nets. So, look, I think it's a fair trade. I really, really do. And like I said, it makes the Nets a million times scarier. The other name that's been mentioned a bunch is Jrue Holiday. He can score, but he's also a really, really, really good, bordering on great perimeter defender. It's something that the Nets don't have. Holiday's probably the more traditional third banana. He won't need the ball in his hands as much as Beal would. And again, I like the idea of that starting 5. Kyrie, Holiday, Harris, Durant, and Jordan. That sounds great to me. Like I said, that can win an NBA title. The only caveat there is to that trade is the Pelicans would need to add another player to make that trade work financially. If the Nets trade Taurean Prince, it's the same package. It's LeVert, Prince, Allen, and Kurucs. You can throw Zanin Musa in there instead of Kurucs, but Kurucs is the better player. I'll also kick in 2 firsts. But if the Nets are giving up Prince, the Nets will need a backup 4. And I'm looking at a guy like Nicolo Melli. Had a solid rookie year last year. Spent some time in Europe, so he's on the older side for a rookie. He's 29 years old. But he played well this year. 6.5 points, 3 rebounds, 1.5 assists. Half a steal, half a block per game. He shot the ball efficiently, 42% from the field. 33.5% from beyond the arc. I don't mind taking on Melli. I don't think he would be a big stumbling block in this trade. And if it doesn't work out, he's on an expiring contract anyway, if you look at next year. The last trade is the blockbuster. The biggest trade that the Nets will have made since Pierce and Garnett. It involves Ben Simmons. I understand that the chances of the Sixers trading Ben Simmons to a team within their division is slim to none. But if they can get a sexy, big-name head coach, any one of the 5 guys I mentioned, or, Jason Kidd, Jay Wright, whoever, and that coach says, I want players who can shoot. I can't work with a point guard who can't shoot. I want 4 guys who can shoot plus Joel Embiid. That's the way the NBA is going now. Then yeah, Ben Simmons will be traded. And it's the same offer as Jrue Holiday, minus Melli, of course. LeVert, Prince, Allen, and Kurucs or Musa. I will kick in 3 first-round picks. That's how elite Ben Simmons is. But I wouldn't hold my breath over this trade. Like I said, the chances of the Sixers trading Simmons to the Nets is slim to none. Even the chances of him being traded in general, I don't think are that great. Also, how are you gonna arrange that lineup? Kyrie, Harris, Durant, Simmons, and Jordan? Look, that can work. I mean, defensively in the front court, you're not having a good game. DeAndre Jordan, Kevin Durant, and Ben Simmons, forget about it. But Simmons really needs the ball in his hands to be successful. Beal doesn't as much. Holiday doesn't as much. Simmons really does. He's a guy who starts out at the perimeter with an ISO and then he blows by the defender for the layup. It's possible he can kick it out to a waiting shooter, but I don't think Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are going to be that happy with that arrangement. I don't think that works. The geometry of the court for the Nets with Simmons on it, I don't think it works that well. Could it work? Yes. It's conceivable, but you need everyone to sign off on that, and everyone needs strictly assigned roles. it's very possible that can blow up. If you take away anything from that last segment, it's that there are a bunch of different options that the Nets can go in. And when they get on the clock with the 19th overall pick, assuming they don't trade it, they could take a point guard. If Dinwiddie's part of the trade, they could take a shooting guard. If they want to move on from Tyler Johnson and Garrett Temple, they can take a small forward. If they want to move TLC to the 2, they could take a power forward. If they trade Prince and Kurucs, they could even take a center if they're not sold on Nick Claxton. The thing that I think is most likely is that they take a power forward, namely a stretch 4. And the best stretch 4 that's going to be available to the Nets at 19 is Saddiq Bey out of Villanova. Has a great wingspan, can play both forward positions, can guard multiple positions. He shot 45% from 3 last year. I mean, if you were to write down on a piece of paper what the Nets need, it would look a lot like Saddiq Bey. Really good in pick and rolls, really good ball handler. The thing is, he's not good defensively. That needs a ton of work. He also doesn't have a good jumper. You know, it's really weird, his shooting motion. But I think this guy profiles as a really good stretch 4 and a really good defender. I think he's going to have a solid NBA career. Sean Marks has said that re-signing Joe Harris is priority number 1, and I agree with that sentiment. This guy is one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. The Nets turned his career around. It looked like he was going to flame out of the NBA when he left Cleveland. The Nets bring him in, they give him a shot, and immediately he turns into a great three-point shooter. 2 years ago, he led the NBA in three-point percentage. Last year, he shot 42.5% from beyond the arc. Yeah, the Nets need to bring him back. I have no problem with him starting. I agree with the sentiment that he's the number 1 priority. But on that same token, I do want to get rid of Garrett Temple. Temple really didn't impress me this year. He really didn't do anything to stand out. In the playoffs, he was dreadful. I think the Nets can move on from him. They'll save $5 million. The Nets are going to be a luxury tax team next year. They need to save as much money as they can. I have no problem letting Temple walk. There is one other thing that deserves to be mentioned. If the Nets trade the 19th overall pick, along with Prince, they will need a backup power forward. Fortunately, they have some really good recruiters in Durant and Kyrie. They can sign someone to a starting salary of over $6 million with the taxpayers mid-level exception. I've got a list of 5 guys who I think make sense. Serge Ibaka, Marcus Morris, Davis Bertans, Christian Wood, and Carmelo Anthony. Serge Ibaka to the Nets has been rumored for a while. Him and Durant did play together in Oklahoma City. Ibaka is a great defender, can shoot threes. He would be a perfect net. Marcus Morris really impressed me with the Knicks this year. He was by far and away their best player in most games. And with the Clippers, he's kind of faded into the background a little bit, but he's still, contributing. Not at the clip he was with the Knicks, but he's still getting his. I think Morris would work. Davis Bertans is another great shooter. You can never have too much shooting. I mean, the way the NBA is going with being so three-point happy, every team could use a guy like Davis Bertans. Last year, he averaged 15.5 points per game while shooting 42.5% from beyond the arc. He would be a picture-perfect net. Christian Wood is a really good defender. Played really well for the Pistons this year. In some games, he was their best player. He can shoot the ball well, 38.5% from beyond the arc. He averaged 13 points. Wood is a really underrated player. And Carmelo Anthony has had a little bit of a renaissance in Portland. He's shown that he can still contribute. He needs to buy into coming off the bench. And if he doesn't, okay, fine. I have no problem not bringing him in, but if he does, if he buys into that role, it doesn't get much better than having Spencer Dinwiddie as your sixth man, Carmelo Anthony as your seventh man, and Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot as your eighth man. I'll close this with recapping the Nets depth chart. There is a lot to track here. I'll do the best I can. At point guard, it's Kyrie Irving and Spencer Dinwiddie. At shooting guard, it's Bradley Beal, Jrue Holiday, or Joe Harris, depending on what trades happen, and Tyler Johnson. He played really well. Sean Marks likes him. I have no problem bringing him back as the backup shooting guard. At small forward, Joe Harris or Kevin Durant, again depending on trades, and Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. At power forward, this is the big one, Kevin Durant or Ben Simmons and Nicolo Melli, Sadiq Bey, or any one of the five power forwards that I mentioned, Ibaka, Morris, Bertans, Wood, or Melo. If the Nets do my Beal trade, that means that Durant is the starting four, and the Nets are going to have either Sadiq Bey or any one of the five power forwards that I mentioned when talking about free agency as the backup. If the Nets do my Holiday trade, Durant will be the starting four, and Melli will be his backup. If the Nets do my Simmons trade, Durant slides over to the 3, Simmons slides over to the 4, and the Nets will have either Sadiq Bey or any one of the five power forwards that I mentioned, Ibaka, Morris, Bertans, Wood, or Melo, as Simmons' backup. And center is DeAndre Jordan and Nicholas Claxton. I like Claxton a lot. I think he should be the backup center. He should get a chance to show what he can do. I liked him coming out of Georgia last year. I was really happy when the Nets took him. And it's a shame that he got hurt. I really wanted to see what he could do in the bubble. Regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show coming your way tomorrow. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that they pick Aaron Judge home runs up on the radar screen in Red Square.